Hi, Peter. We are seeing BrandZ is a truly global brand building platform, and different regions are contributing to the top 100. And how's this year's result look like?
Well, as you say, these are all global valuations, but we can split them into where they're based. So we can have a look at a regional performance, if you like. And if you look at the top 100 brands, they are totally dominated by US brands. In fact, if you add in the couple of Canadian brands, over half of them, 51, are from North America. But they're primarily US brands. And that goes even further when you look at the proportion of value that they represent, which is over 2/3. In second place, we see Asia, and that, of course, is predominantly made up by brands from China. So who said the slowdown in China was holding back strong brands? Certainly not. And then in third place, we see Europe. But those brands are growing much less fast than the other ones that we see. And in fact, if you look at the performance compared to last year, the top 10 US brands, which are the same as the top 10 overall, they grew a massive 10% compared to 3% for the whole of the top 100. Continental Europe did pretty well, 5% growth. And then we're seeing more modest growth and mixed across Europe. But of course, Asia and China have been held back very much by slowdown and economic considerations in that market. North America, as I said, is the same as the top 10 brands overall. And you've talked quite a little bit about those at the beginning of this presentation. But we are seeing the disruption, the innovation, the sheer appeal that they create for consumers on a global basis. That's the point. It's not just within North America, it's throughout the world. And that's why they are incredibly successful. And that disruption theme, if you like, is very well represented by a relatively smaller brand, but one that's entered the car rankings for the first time, Tesla. A lovely electric car brand which is got a terrific brand purpose. It stands for a change in the world and is seen as a brand that's very, very distinctive, very innovative, and highly, highly appealing, even to people who've never bought it. And of course, with the launch now of the Mark III of an affordable version, we're seeing that brand has got very many places to go. And we see, of course, the completely different picture in South America. So there, unfortunately, there are no brands from LATAM which make the top 100. They only make the beer category. So I suppose that's quite cheerful in the sense that LATAM is party time and lots of great beer brands. They, of course, don't look as if they've done very well over this last year. That's less to do with the brand and more to do with a really dire economic situation. In fact, if you look at brands long term, and I believe we ought to do that to a much greater degree than sometimes we're tempted to do so, Skull, which is the top Latin American brand, grew 537% over 11 years. So brand strength, being meaningfully different, does lead you to a sustainable long-term future if you've got a great brand.
Absolutely. And if we are zooming into Asia, zooming into these top Asian brands, what are some of the key findings?
Well, it's a very different sort of list from some of the other countries that we've seen. And you talked, I think, a little bit about JD.com, which is not on the top 10 over here, but nevertheless is representative of what's happening with these brands. There are lots of partnerships. Tencent has got a partnership with JD.com. It's completely a lifestyle brand. It enables you to do virtually anything you want to do. So it's entirely consumer friendly with its WeChat service. You can do all sorts of things. You can hire cars. You can do everything that Facebook has been trying to do and is saying it's going to do for the next 10 years. It's already happening in fast time with brands like that in China. I think we also see a good brand in NTT, which is again giving itself that a chance to be a quad play, to be a major part of consumers' life, and is again innovating tremendously in the space which is really important to consumers nowadays. The difference, I think, is although it's very nice to have a big Japanese brand like NTT in the top 10 of Asia, that's hugely different from 2006, 11 years ago, when Japanese brands dominated the Asian brands in terms of numbers and value. That's switched completely to Chinese brands. Now you've got 7 out of the 10 are China brands, and 8 out of 10 of those brands are less than 30 years old. So the new vibrant economy, appealing to the new younger generation, but also looking outwards and beginning to grow across all demographics and all countries, is incredibly impressive from Asia and China's point of view.
And you made a very good point, and they are young, they are very vibrant, and in the meantime they are also very keen to learn from the established like American and European brands. And how's the European brands doing this year?
Well, the European brands, interesting, in continental Europe, it's the only top 10 we see where every single brand grew in value over last year. Didn't happen in any other region. And also, they're all very traditional, very luxury brands, car brands. They're brands with a history. So they've got a great feeling to them, which is very much reflected in the quality of those brands. And indeed, the newer brands can learn that. JD.com you talked about is very much about quality in a different modern way. But the heritage of these brands, again, is something that they jealously guard. Unfortunately, they haven't actually grown as fast over time, because if you look at the makeup of the brands within the top 100 from continental Europe, they're half the number of brands and they're worth half the value that they were before. That's not to say that there aren't extremely important and good brands, but they in turn can learn from the newcomers as well as the other way around. And what we see in terms of some of the successes of those brands is that actually being successful outside your region is very, very important. So we see brands like Chanel, Zara, Adidas, very, very popular in China. So in spite of a slowdown there, there's still room for very attractive, meaningfully different brands. And then, of course, the other trend you see are the discounters, Aldi and Lidl, as represented here, who are challenging the incumbents, particularly in developing markets like Canada, Australia, US and the UK. And interesting to see how much those brands can sustain that growth as they move to more of a full service model. But nevertheless, they are a complete threat to some of the incumbents. And finally, but not last from continental Europe, is that lovely brand IKEA, which is beginning at last to respond to consumers and to be available online. It's been quite a frustration for many of the people who wish to have a much more frictionless experience with those brands and to be able to buy it when they want and how they want. And that's benefiting IKEA both in terms of being much more cost effective in terms of the running costs of the company, but also available to consumers. Then we get to the UK. The UK looks a pretty gloomy story, but actually that's an exaggeration. If you look at the brands which are dragging down the UK, they're oil brands and they're banking brands, again, whose fortunes are all interlinked. And they dropped a massive 18% over the last 12 months. The rest of the brands actually grew a little bit. And so we should be looking at some of those successes as well. And I think two very good examples are Lipton Tea, which is, yes, it's UK based, but actually it's being very successful in massive markets like the US, particularly with its cold drinks, and the hot drinks in India with tea being one of the greatest growth drinks globally, and also riding the health wave. So a very good export brand from the UK. as indeed is my other example, which is Dove, which is again a real flying a flagship for innovation. Dove has done two lovely innovations this year. One is the dry underarm, which has gone down an absolute storm, and the other is their foot spa type brand, which again is very unusual and extends the brand franchise into newer areas to newer consumers, but still maintains the Doveness of that brand.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. It seems like everywhere around the world is going through the disruptive innovation, and brands are going through this reform and digitalization. Established brands are trying to learn from the young brands to maintain dynamic and vibrant. Young brands are learning from the established brands and trying to become sustainable. And they are learning from each other, and which is critical because that is going to be the next few years' competitive landscape change around the world.
And we should look at brand potential of our brands on the BrandZ study, because that can give us clues about, are you getting it right, or can you get it more right to maximize your potential?
It's critical. Well, thank you very much, Peter.